Good morning. You all still excited about the conference on the third and final day? Yes, excellent. That was a good scream in the back. You are in for a treat, I promise. This has been, to my mind, a really wonderful conference. We're really gratified that we've heard lots of really excited comments about what people have heard. And you are in for a treat over the next two sessions. So I just want to do a bit of framing and then we will jump in. You know, for the past 2 days, we've been exploring how the push for sustainability is challenging the status quo across the global economy. We've looked at cars, we've looked at textiles, we've looked at finance and much more. I'm going to be having the pleasure of moderating the next two sessions, and these next two sessions I think are worth thinking about in concert as deep dives into companies that are growing by trying to unseat the incumbents in the global economy, particularly incumbents in energy and also beyond it. This next session is called Data for Decarbonization, but it might also be called the Disruptors. Because what you have before you are executives of two companies that are shaking up the building industry and industries beyond it. Let me just tell you before we jump in and talk to Emmanuel and Yue about what each of these companies does, just so we're all on the same page. Zhang Yue is the head of Broad. Broad is an extensive company that works in many aspects of the energy industry, doing some really interesting things. Among other things, it makes air filtering machines that filter out, it claims, 99.9% of PM 2.5, small particulate matter that is unfortunately not a strange substance to those of you who live in China, at least major Chinese cities. Broad produces interesting air conditioners powered not by electricity but by natural gas. And also, quite interestingly, Broad makes prefabricated slabs used in the construction of buildings. Prefabricated slabs that it contends are much more energy efficient and are much less wasteful, in addition to being easier to construct. Schneider Electric, Emmanuel Lacarrigue from Schneider Electric is involved, as you heard the other day when one of Emmanuel's colleagues, In Zhang, was here, is involved in many aspects having to do with particularly software and energy. And I'll just mention two quite interesting things that we'll jump into with Emmanuel. One has to do with what you're doing with electric vehicles in Shenzhen, and one has to do with building software. It was software particularly having to do with the reduction of energy use in buildings. So let's just jump in, and I actually want to start quite broad with the two of you, because it strikes me that both of you, if you do well what you say you are trying to do, will end up disintermediating major industries. And Zhang Yue, I want to start with you, because you are about shaking up the construction industry, among other things. And it seems to me that what you're doing with these slabs is a threat to construction companies that have been in the business of doing buildings the traditional way. So talk to us about how that technology emerged and what the implications are right now in the industry that you're trying to disintermediate.
I will talk about slab at a later stage. I want to talk about big data first.
Slab first, and then we'll talk about big data later.
那预制板你要跟我拉一块上来，我带了一个东西来，大家都。
I brought with me a sample. Please give me the sample. When we talk about slab, everybody is thinking about concrete. But 10 years ago, we started this frame made out of steel. You know, even within 1 day, 3 floors can be completed. On YouTube, you know, the single day clicks reach 5 million clicks because of these prefabricated slabs and also the speedy construction. And it's not a concrete frame, it's a steel frame. But 4 years ago, we believe that steel is not the ideal one. This is a stainless steel material. Let me show you the feature of this stainless steel, it has higher security because flexibility reached more than 60%. Flexibility of the concrete is 0. Normal steel is only 10%. Because we are in Yunnan and Sichuan, and it's prone to earthquake. So if there's earthquake, there is no flexibility, and the concrete would collapse. But the stainless steel is perfect. But the even better one feature is the longevity. For the stain frame, it has the age or length of life cycle of 100 years. But for stainless one, the life cycle can be as long as 10,000 years.
Questions. So that is used to build the floor of a building, and you run wires and pipes through between the sheets of the sandwich?
都可以。
Okay.
都可以。
Indeed.
电线
wires and sensors in between, and also the heat blocking and noise blocking. You can feel how light it is.
So let me ask one other question. What are the sustainability implications of this? This has an effect on reducing waste in construction materials. Is that correct? Does it have some effect on reducing, or does it increase the amount of energy that's necessary to build the building?
好，
But I want to talk this with the big data connection, because on the planet, the largest waste is the whole planet is from construction sector. 50% of the all waste from the construction sector. If we use this as slab, we can reduce this 50% to almost 0%. So 49% being eliminated. The waste, 49% being eliminated. Let's imagine for the concrete frame, a concrete building, every 50 years we need to demolish. So if those wastes would be landfilled, then within 200 years, the whole land of the Earth would be filled with construction waste, because construction waste is not biodegradable. It's even more harmful and dangerous than the plastic waste. As I said, it has indefinite life cycle, 10,000 years plus. But the key is it's very cheap as well. We use very light materials, and the longevity is 100 times better than the conventional buildings, but it's much cheaper.
We'll come back to some of the implications of this. Thank you very much. Emmanuel, I want to shift to you, and I want to ask you about particularly some of the work that you're doing with regard to electric vehicles, because I think it's interesting on this subject of disintermediation on two levels. One is technologically. Obviously, electric vehicles pose a threat to the incumbent automotive industry, and there are implications for the utilities as well. But it seems to me that there's also a business model implication here that's really interesting that we talked about when we chatted before, which was the way that Schneider is trying to effectively act as a middleman between China and, on the one hand, in the US and Europe, on the other hand, in bridging the deployment of electric vehicle infrastructure. So talk us through that.
Yeah, so we are working mostly on the infrastructure side, right? So on the how you charge those vehicles.
Yep.
And you make sure that you supply them with, hopefully, green energy.
Yep.
As much as possible. And what you see, especially for fleet operators, so people who have a fleet of 1,000, 10,000 delivery vehicles or buses, today the economic equation shifts very quickly towards electrical vehicles. And if you do the math and look at the total cost of ownership of a delivery truck, electric wins today hands down versus a combustion engine. So you see a lot of companies, a lot of municipalities wanting to shift to electric, not only because it's more sustainable, but it's also cheaper. Now,
it's cheaper because over the life cycle, electricity is cheaper than gasoline.
Yes, the cost of the vehicle is a bit higher, but the cost of the energy is much lower, and there's virtually no maintenance, or very few maintenance costs on electrical vehicles. So you run that type of vehicles for a number of years, and electric wins by far. Now, when it comes to charge those vehicles, in many places, you figure out that all of a sudden now you want to charge your trucks or your buses, and you don't have enough energy on the grid. Or you may need to recharge them at some point during the day while they are working.
Wait, let's just stop here a second. So you're saying that today the penetration of electric vehicles is significant enough that it is challenging the robustness of the grid?
No. What I'm saying is that when you have a concentration, like when you want to charge the vehicles of your fleet or your buses, right? Your municipality, your buses go back to a central point at night, and that central point at night may not have enough energy to charge all your buses.
I see.
That entails a lot of needs to either upgrade the lines for which the utilities are not ready for, and so on and so forth. And then, in many cases, the municipality or the fleet operator, in that case, ends up saying, "Look, I'm going to produce my own energy," and this is where you have a first disintermediation. The other part is when you need to size that electrical vehicle fleet. If you delivery vehicles, if you have in your fleet a delivery vehicle that will run for 200 kilometers during a day, and another one that goes for 400 kilometers during a day, you don't need the same battery. This is not the same vehicle, right? And this is not the same economics. So you want to size very precisely, depending on your routes, depending on the behavior of the drivers, depending on the type of products you're going to deliver. You want to be very accurate on how you size your vehicles, because here again, the economics can shift a lot.
And what exactly is it that Schneider is doing in the infrastructure system, to take one example, Xinjiang?
So the first thing we do, and this is where we have that bridge, so we have actually...
The international bridge.
Yeah, we have two companies, one in California, one in Shenzhen, which are roughly doing the same thing.
Meaning you've invested in these two startups?
Yes, two startups we have created or invested in, one in California, one in Shenzhen. And what they do first is, depending on the routes that you need to deliver your goods, we help the operator size the vehicles, right? So you need a vehicle of that characteristics, and they're here for that, and here. So it's first software.
Yep.
And of course, we size the charging infrastructure you will need in a city or in your central point where the vehicles return at night. So this is all about software, and it is all about data. So you solve that problem with a ton of data that you collect while the vehicles are on the road and while they are charging, and so on and so forth. And of course, there is this intermediation, and probably energy is one of the few industries which is now ripe for that type of disruptions.
So I want to shift actually to the geopolitical implications of this. And I want to start with you, Emmanuel, and then Zhengyue, I want to go back to you. One of the themes of the discussions over the last 2 days is that we happen all to be sitting here at a time of unprecedented tension between China and much of the West, and in particular between China and the United States. You just talked about the fact that Schneider is hoping to act as a bridge, has invested in two similar companies on either side of the Pacific Ocean. As I understand it, there is a kind of play that you're hoping strategically that Schneider will make that actually takes the tension between the two countries as a predicate to that business opportunity. Not to suggest that you think the tension's a great thing, but that you think the tension is going to stay, and therefore you've got to build a business based on it. Talk us through that.
The first thing is, it's obvious that we live in a different world than 10 years ago when it comes to trade and globalization, And I don't want to judge if we like it or not, but this is what we have. And so as business people, we have to be pragmatic and, of course, respecting the values of all our stakeholders, trying to do the best for all of them. Now, it's a different world. And in that world of energy, it's obvious that, for instance, what you will see in countries like the US or like Australia, you will see the very rapid emergence of self-powered systems where businesses and homeowners will want to power their house or their business by themselves, where there are solar panels or wind and batteries and so on and so forth. And it's happening now. And you could say it's correlated with the lack of investment on the grid in some parts of the country. But long story short, people will want to produce their power. At the same time, in China, so China is consuming and producing twice as much electricity as the US, right? So that's a fact. Half of the vehicles, the electrical vehicles on the planet, are on Chinese roads. 40% of renewable energy is produced in China, 70% of lithium-ion batteries capacity is in China, and so on and so forth, and that's just the beginning. Plus the government is clearly strategically wants to position China as a strong power in electrical. So inevitably you will have a lot of technologies that will be created in China for that world of decentralized energy, electrification of transportation.
That you're going to export to other parts, you're going to be sort of the middleman.
You will have technological leaders in China and a need in other countries.
So I'm going to stop you, but I just, again, want to mark this for everyone, because I think certainly a lot of the Westerners in this room walked into this room with an assumption that technological development happened on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. And what you're hearing is that technological development is increasingly happening right here. This is no news to many of you in this room who are in these industries, but I dare say it's actually news to a lot of people perhaps who aren't in this room. And that brings me back to Zheng Yue. So I want to ask you, with the assumption, as we've discussed, about the technological innovation that you just showed us in what you're doing, how is the tension between the United States and China, or between China and other parts of the world, affecting the economics of your business, if at all?
About 15 years ago, we started with a collection of energy-related data. So our users are scattered in over 80 countries in the world. Even though the surfaces of the buildings look similar, the energy consumption level varied significantly. And we did a survey about our users in these over 80 countries. We found that if you do not have the insulator and a general level insulator or very good insulator, the data really varied significantly. I was shocked. And so starting from then, we started to have a 20-centimeter insulator to keep the warmth inside the building. The energy data is most invisible, but it's most important, especially the building energy consumption. So 15 years ago, we found it was extremely important. And besides, the building-related energy consumption takes a very big proportion among all the consumption of energy. So if we increase the efficiency of the building consumption, and that efficiency increase can be very high, we now have a high requirement for the comfortness or the temperature in the building. So to reduce the energy consumption of the buildings can become a very, or even the most important measure for protecting the environment and the climate. So every year we collect such data about our users, from our users. Later we found another issue, and against that issue we invented this device. This is very small, but it can send data to all over the world through Wi-Fi. 11 years ago, we invented this device. We could detect PM 2.5 and CO2. In Guangdong, you are in Shenzhen, so in Guangdong and Shenzhen, CO2 is around 700. But in Hunan and other regions, it's around 400. In almost every corner of the world, it's about 400. China's economy needs a lot of energy. The indoor air quality, the indoor CO2 and the particles can be detected. And then from that, we can make a judgment about our level of health. China has a very high level of PM 2.5, but through our detection, and actually we have detected such data in over 30 countries. Now, in the Western world, especially in Europe, this data is also quite high. In North America, it's also relatively high. We can see that what's the data in this room. We know that Kunming is good, but this data is actually not very good. The first day, PM 2.5, it was 6. But yesterday, it was over 10.
Ask.
30秒钟。
I just want to ask.
30 minutes, 30 seconds.
糟糕，我没带。
Just a minute, I need to. Please.
Your clients are overwhelmingly in China or fairly equally distributed around the world? Your customers?
我们的客户
In the past 20, and our company is in existence for 31 years, and for the past 25 years, we have customers all over the world, and we have the purification products, detection products, and
it's hard to see, but Bill McDonough is somewhere over there. Can someone give Bill a microphone? Bill, I just want you to react to this. Is this kind of moonshot stuff that only Broad is doing? Is this increasingly being integrated into the work that you're doing and that you're seeing done elsewhere? And to what extent does this actually move the environmental needle?
I think this is one of the more astonishing examples of innovation in the space. And it's been strange in a certain way that a lot of people in the real estate industry actually don't want to know these things because they worry that the people in the buildings will start to complain. So there's a strange dynamic involved here. I think what we're seeing here is some of the most advanced approach, one of the most advanced approaches to this. And it definitely will become part of the new normal.
Have you used any of this in your designs?
Yes.
Broad stuff?
Not yet, not broad, but similar things. We're looking at all kinds of detection, for example, for air quality.
And one last quick question. That one point that you made when you gave your presentation the other day was that this can be done with no added cost. Can this be done with no added cost in the sorts of designs that you're doing?
Yes, it gets built into the qualification of the building. It's not a crazy thing at all.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. I want to, we have a couple more minutes, and I just want to ask one thing, because it strikes me actually that the two of you have a different view on one of the themes that has emerged in this conference as being quite central, which is the notion of electrification. Emmanuel, you're betting on a surge in demand for electricity. You've just talked to us about the shift in transportation to electricity, the notion that centralized grids will no longer be able to handle that surge in electricity. Just play that out for us. What are the implications of that in about 1 minute?
Yeah, so it's very easy. So what we see is that the consumption of electricity will double in the next 20 years, probably before that. Three main factors. The first one is the IT industry, and this is the one that's going to be massive. So we all use a lot of IT tools, and it's growing exponentially. Behind that, you have data centers, and data centers are power intensive. Times 4. So it's not times 2 in the case of data centers and IT, it's times 4. Probably leading to a place where the IT industry would represent something like 30% of the electricity consumption in the world. Then, of course, you have the electrification of a lot of processes, industrial processes, because it's just going to be much more efficient to power them with electricity than with gas or oil, and in many cases also more sustainable. And one of those processes is transportation, but it's going to be very visible. The surge is going to be very high, but transportation should not account for much more than 8 or 9% of electricity.
So that's the sexy stuff that we all hear about, but you're saying there's a lot more that we're not.
It's very sexy, but EVs will be barely a quarter of what data centers will be in that new world.
Raise your hand if you have a question and get a mic to someone, if you have a really quick question. But while we're doing that, Zhengyu, I want to come to you. So very, very quickly, if I understand correctly, actually, your bet is not on electrification. In fact, your air conditioning system runs on natural gas rather than on electricity, because your argument is that that's much more efficient. We're very, very short on time, but just explain to us why your technology is better than electrified air conditioning.
不是这样的，天然气肯定。
Natural gas is not as good as renewables because it's still going to emit CO2s. However, many companies pay a lot of attention to environmental protection, such as Qualcomm. This company, 20 years ago, selected us to work with them to use waste heat from power generation to supply their air conditioners. So they have a lot of power generators, and so the gas emission can be used to produce power, and the heat can be used to supply power to the air conditioners. Actually, there are a lot of potentials for us to tap into to reduce the CO2 emissions. So only those with visions can go into those fields. Many clients of us use the waste heat for cooling. In China, this application is not as good. About 90% of our clients use natural gas for supply of the energy.
Long time to come, which, for instance, natural gas. So that's actually an interesting segue to our next panel. Zhang Yue and Emmanuel Lagarrigue, I want to thank you both very, very much. Much more to talk about, but thanks so much for being here. Thank you.
有一点可以肯定，没有有一点可以肯。
But one point is sure, it's for sure. The waste heat should be used. This is the most essential